Hey everybody, we're going to talk about how I think you should prepare for the coming ending of the Bank Emergency Funding Program. The Bank Term Funding Program is the official name. Coming up, ending on March 11th. A lot of people are talking about it in the financial world, financial media. We've got this here, proof the great crash will begin March 11th. We've got this right here, warning the great crash to start mid-March. So obviously a lot of people are talking about it. A lot of financial, not so much mainstream and corporate news channels, even the business news channels, a little bit, but not really a lot of in-depth detail or deep dives onto what's going to happen in mid-March. All right, so let's get into it. Here's what I think is going to happen on March 11th. Are you ready? Nothing. Nothing. Here's why. Just because the funding program is coming to an end doesn't mean that the banks have to pay this money back on March 11th. There's lending. It's a funding program, and there's lending that occurred. And I can get into all the numbers that each bank, and it's not important. The important thing is that you know that this doesn't have to cause a bank crisis to happen in March. It could happen. It could happen anytime. Something would get hacked, or a system would have to go down. The debt market would have to stop being propped up in a number of different ways that can happen. We've talked about all of them on this channel numerous times. But the bottom line is the banks don't have to repay all the money that they've that they've borrowed in March. So it's not going to be even a noticeable thing. Could something happen? Of course. And I've said that for years. A lot of things could happen. In 2019, I said things could happen, and look what happened in 2020. Things happened. So always prepare, always have emergency funds out of the system. I recommend food, water, emergency essentials out of the system, at least 30 days worth if you can. Also, we've been hearing a lot of stories about people getting their accounts hacked and even drained. Just everyday people, not just big corporations, but everyday people. What I do is I keep the money that I do keep in the banks, I keep it in a bank that I don't transact in that much. In other words, don't keep most of your savings in a checking account that you're using a debit card on at all these different retail locations. The more you use your card here and there and everywhere, the more likely it is the card number is going to get obtained or get put in the wrong hands, and you don't want your account with your most money in it, your biggest savings account, you don't want that to be out there at thousands of different retailers. I mean, that should be common sense, but I know a lot of people, even personally, that they don't even think about that type of thing. They're using their debit card at all these different places. They're swiping it here and there, and that card could be in a few different people's hands. And ask yourself, you know, do you want to use an account that's got a very low balance for those types of things? If you are using a debit card, now many people won't even use a debit card because, and I think that's the even smarter move, just use a credit card. That way, if somebody gets the credit card, they're going to run up maybe a bunch of debt on the credit card, but at least they're not draining your cash, right? Again, common sense, but common sense is not so common. I see a lot of people out there transacting and using their debit card on an account that they've got hundreds of thousands of dollars in. I think it's just crazy, but you know, to each his own, do what you will. But I'm just telling you the way I think about things and what I will do. All right, the Bank Term Funding Program ending in March. I don't think we're going to see anything happen. Keep in mind, they can create trillions of dollars at the click of a mouse. The dollar is no longer tied to any physical asset. We came off the gold standard over 50 years ago. They can liquefy these banks at the click of a mouse. Now, of course, they want to set up a program, and they did do that in March of 2023 because there needs to be some sort of orderly fashion in the way that banks, you know, get the money or borrow the money. And this did help keep, I think, the banking system solvent. And because it's ending, it doesn't mean it's going to end right away. But we should always be alert, always be on your toes. Folks, if we knew, if it was easy to forecast, we would never have any sort of financial crisis because everyone would know about it, right? So when something happens, it's usually a black swan. It's usually unexpected, and it usually hits when no one expects it, and it's usually something that people didn't expect. So expect maybe something crazy that we haven't seen happen before. But bottom line is, be prepared. It doesn't change, what I would, be prepared for. I would say always use caution. All right. So let's get into some other economic financial news here. And one of the big buzz phrases out there in the business media, financial media, is economic growth. Look at the economic growth. Look at the unemployment number, how low it is still below 4%. Look at the gross domestic product, GDP growth, right? Economic growth. Well, take a look at this. And this proves that the quote-unquote growth that they're calling it, well, one, is just a lot of consumers racking up debt. But two, take a look at this chart and tell me what you see here. First of all, the orange, the very low bar there, that is the quarter-over-quarter change in total debt, right? The yellow is the quarter-over-quarter change in gross domestic product, and what's being looked at as economic growth. Well, the first quarter 2023, the change in total debt, not a lot compared to the change in GDP. So that's pretty good economic growth if that were to continue. Take a look at what happened though, starting in the second quarter 2023. Look at the orange, the change in the total debt, versus the yellow, the growth, right? Again, in the third quarter, the debt greatly surpassing the economic growth. Again, in the fourth quarter, right? This is what I'm saying. So just because they can look at a few different numbers here and there and tell you that everything's wonderful, just look at this. It's taking more and more money creation in the form of debt to create smaller and smaller and smaller amounts of economic growth. And again, that's not even counting all of the debt that consumers are taking on just to get by, just to buy the necessities and the essential goods and items. And even that gets put into the GDP number. So pretty outrageous when you think about it, with all the debt that people are in right now, that we still don't have economic growth or GDP that's above the amount of increase in the debt. You see what I'm saying here? So the debt is rapidly outpacing any sort of false economic growth or economic indicator. So, let that be a visual lesson there. That's why I like to use those charts here from time to time. All right, now back to the bank situation. There were a lot of people out there trying to put the pieces together. And what was talked about was the billionaires. The billionaires selling their stocks, the insider selling that was happening. A lot of mega rich people, selling off a lot of stock. And people said, hey, maybe that's because this bank term funding program is ending in March. These people are getting prepared. Well, if you look, they've been preparing for a while. We have Zuckerbucks, last year, was it a year ago now? He started building his emergency bunker in Hawaii. We've got big sell-offs. We've got Bezos, Jamie Dimon, Zuckerbucks, all selling big chunks off their old companies. I've got some notes over here. Could those be warnings? Absolutely. Is it interesting that they sold these big chunks of stocks? Is it interesting that they sold these in the coming months here, the months leading up to this March date with the funding program ending? Yes, it's interesting. But again, I don't think anything's going to happen. I'm not the type of person to sit here and put timelines on things, because I know how easily this can be propped up, how easily this can be manipulated. Again, we're the only channel here to tell you that the housing bubble would not go bust like it did in 2008. And if you've been on this channel for a few years, I think you'll know that we're probably the only channel out there that said that. And it hasn't made me very popular. People like to believe that everything is going to correct and we're going to see a big crash in the markets, and that the money they've been saving up, now they can go out and buy 2 houses because they've been saving up money every paycheck. I wish that was the case. I wish, things would crash. People that are in buying, or people that are waiting to buy, that would be great for them. But if the crash were to happen like that, like a lot of people want, you would see a lot of other negative consequences that go along with that. For example, for a crash like that to happen, you would have to see the money lending dry up like it did in 2008. And that in itself would be very, very devastating to the job market, because when people can no longer borrow money, they stop spending. And when people stop spending, jobs are gone very quickly. You would see unemployment spike up to probably levels we've never seen before if one simple thing were to happen. That would be the banks would have to stop lending money. So if that were to happen, that's when the chaos unfolds, when people can no longer go further into debt, when they can no longer swipe their credit cards and take on bigger and bigger amounts of debt. That's when the chaos begins. Is that going to happen at some point? I don't know. Could it happen? Absolutely. Do I think you should be ready for it? Absolutely. Do I think you should live in fear and go hide under the couch or under the bed and bury your money in the backyard? I mean, you may want to. You may want to consider that. But I don't know anybody that's doing that, and I'm not doing that personally. Bottom line is, be prepared, but don't freak out. To put it in simple terms, don't freak out. All right, let's talk about this. This is pretty interesting because over the last few years, we've heard a lot about food shortages. And not just that, but people not being able to afford the food. Well, again, as long as the banks can loan out money, people can swipe credit cards, they're always going to be able to afford food. Just never stop the amount of debt that can be put out there. But take a look at this. Obesity, now greater risk to global health than hunger. So instead of food shortages, we have people eating too much food. Here's the thing. It's not good food. I don't even want to think about some of the things they're putting in the fast food, all the modified junk, and I don't want to get into much of the details on it. The bottom line is, what used to be real food, a lot of it's not even real food anymore. It's a bunch of gook and replacements is what it is. And I think that's the reason for obesity. So if there's a food shortage, yeah, there's a food shortage of good, real, healthy food. But there's not a food shortage of a bunch of junk food that they can just create a bunch of sugar and, who knows what else. Not my area of expertise, but I do know that when I read a package or label and there's 50 different ingredients, it's, I bought it for one thing. I bought the item for one thing, but you read the ingredients, it's like 50 other things in addition to the item that you thought you were going to eat, right? So I think you know what I mean on that one. A lot of big money's running to alternative assets, cryptos, and gold and silver. Here's what they're doing with gold and silver, though. They're keeping the price suppressed on the derivative market. In other words, the paper market, what they can sell for just digitally on a digital screen, they're suppressing the price. They're shorting the metals, and gold and silver specifically, and other things too, but the two biggest metals, I think, for investors, gold and silver, they're suppressing the price. Now, what's going to happen when the suppression ends? Will we see $50, $100, $1,000 silver? Who knows? So keep stacking, folks, because this year the risk is higher than it's been in many, many years. We have events coming up in November. Be ready. And again, I downplayed the whole March thing at the beginning of this video because I know how the funding program works, but it doesn't mean something can't happen even tomorrow, anytime, today. As I'm recording this, something can happen. So be ready, keep stacking. Come back to this channel for more financial, economic news, analysis, and planning. And if you like what we talk about here, please consider subscribing, give us a like, help the algorithm, and we'll talk to everybody very soon. Thanks for being here. Big love. Bye now. Peace.